focus on that now because I'm delighted to have with me Dirk Hoke, who is Chief Executive Officer at Volocopter. And I'm just going to have a little chat with him. So Dirk, just start by context for your role in SESAR, because I know Volocopter has been involved in projects for a long time, but you only became a member of the JU last year. What made you decide to take that step?
Yeah, we were engaged in many activities, and we are still a very small company, so we had to really focus. But last year, Volocopter decided to join because we always said one of the most critical part is public awareness, and we need to talk about regulation, we need to talk about integration into our daily life. And we believe that the Joint Undertaking will help us to address many of the fears of the public, that we will work closely together with regulators and standardization bodies in order to identify the problems, what scares people, and how we can take that into future operation.
I want to come back on that issue of public opinion later on. So it really is that being part of the network, that collaborative approach, but also, and therefore being able to talk to the regulators, the policymakers more easily, but that wider issue, which we'll come back to. Your company motto is, "We bring urban air mobility to life." Now, I know that you launched a vertiport at Rome Airport, at Fiumicino Airport last week. You had the first crewed test flight. How close are we to this becoming a reality? Because we heard people talking about to 2030 and so on, but I think your goal is to take to the skies at Fiumicino in 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, this is quite interesting. The people see it flying and still think it's only happening 2030, 2035. And when we tell them we plan to have a commercial operation by end of 24, they look like, oh. And what you saw flying was not even our newest product. It's still a prototype, the 2X. In parallel, we already work on a B0 model, which is currently doing flight tests in La. We're going to start flight tests with the full B model early next year. So we do flight tests in different stages, and we're preparing for certification by 24.
But we were talking earlier, and in the last session, one of the speakers talked about the conditions to allow U-Space to take off. What do you need? Concretely, you're getting ready, you're nearly there. We talked earlier about the legislative and the regulatory framework and so on. Do you have the framework in place that you need, or do we need to do a lot more to make it possible? So all day we've been saying technology's there, it's the other things we need.
I think, to be honest, we are currently in the process of evaluating that with our partners in Paris, with our partners Aéroport de Paris and RATP, and in Rome with Aeroporti di Roma and Urban V. We're looking at what is needed, because we are in close contact with the local authorities as well, and of course for the certification with EASA. So we find out now more and more what is needed in order to be prepared for taking commercial operations up in 24. So for the moment, we believe it's possible, but of course it would be nicer to have already a smoother process so that we know exactly we have to do A, B, C, D, and then we are able to fly. I think...
Yeah, please, go on.
It's not yet a problem, because we will not, what a lot of people are afraid of, that then suddenly hundreds of vehicles will come into the market. We will have a step-by-step approach. We will have a few demonstrations where we have A to A flights, we have A to B flights. So we will show that we can do commercial operation from 24 onwards. But it is a step-by-step approach, which gives us time to work on the other topics that you discussed already today, because we all want to go to autonomous flying, because if you want to really scale the business model, at the end, it's about automated and autonomous flying. And this gives us a few years to prepare for that, while we get experience in commercial operation in urban spaces. But we still have to accelerate, because I remember that I was involved in similar discussions a couple of years ago, and it was still the same discussion that we had about ATM going to the next level. And I think this is our biggest challenge. We have to discuss how we accelerate the merge between U-Space and ATM in the future.
And what do you see as the key reason why we're not making progress as fast as we need to?
I think that's a very difficult question because I'm not involved in all the discussions, so I cannot dare to say what is the problem. What I see is we are used to. I think the whole system is built on trust, and I think that's also very good. So I think there's no compromise possible on safety. And this is exactly what we do also for urban air mobility. We will have exactly the same safety standards as in civil aerospace. So this is, I think, is a given, and we cannot take any risk to play on the safety side. But I think what is also clear is that we have a system that is built on rules that have been created 100 years ago and that have been slowly evolving, but also very often saying, don't change a running system.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a moment now where we need urgently a digital transformation away from a human-centric system to a computer-based system. Of course, always with humans involved, but the next level of aerospace is not possible with the system we have, and we heard that today several times. But flying 24,000 aircraft today is a challenge. Going to 30, 40, and having then several thousands drones on top of it, I think we all know that is not possible with the system that we see today.
I just wanted to come back. You talked there about trust, and you mentioned public attitudes at the beginning of all of this. And there was an EASA study done, published last year, I think, suggesting the public is broadly, perhaps, more sympathetic to the idea, but there were concerns about safety, about noise, about cybersecurity, and it also depended what it was for. They were much more positive if it was for hospital deliveries or whether, rather than for private use. And also, Angus Keeley, who's the CEO of an Irish aircraft leasing giant, Aircop, said at a recent conference, he suggested that air taxis would never be feasible outside an airport setting because, he argued, you simply won't get permission to land on the roof of a building in a city. Is he right? Is he wrong? And how do you, given that broadly positive public attitude, do you perceive public perception is going to be a big challenge when we get closer to deployment or not?
I can only tell from the experience last week. We had on Thursday morning 250 people coming at 8:30 to the airport in Rome. In order to get there, they had to get up very early. So people are really interested in the topic. They want to see it. And all the comments I heard was like, oh, it's much less noisy than I thought. And it's much more impressive than I thought. And this is an early prototype, yeah. So 2 times 250 people, I think, became ambassador for the topic because they saw it's not an annoying picture. It's not as loud as helicopters. It is something that we will see we can integrate safely into our natural mobility network. I think that's why a step-by-step approach is so important. We have to take that serious. We have to involve people so that they can witness that it's feasible. We did similar things when we were flying in Stuttgart. We asked the audience before the flight if they would use such a system and what they expect from noise-wise. And we asked them afterwards, and it changed completely. So we see once the people witness that it's less dangerous, that it's less noisy, and it's less annoying, people start opening up.
But the point that Mr. Kelly was making, which perhaps sort of links to what we call in English NIMBY, not in my backyard. So in principle, fine. All sounds like a great idea, as long as they don't land on my roof or... do you think that will be, so that broad public positiveness...
Yeah,
Is he right? You obviously, I mean, when I read out his quote, you looked deeply suspicious of it. So you don't think that's going to be a huge issue?
No, I think, you see, the problem is that a lot of people have a picture or in mind more like the Fifth Element, where we have, let's say, millions of vehicles flying above our heads, or a lot of people have, when we first saw the DJI drones coming into the market, we had this high-frequency noise everywhere. People didn't like it. So, first of all, the noise level is really, I think, not as you cannot compare it to such toy drones. It's a total different frequency. It's more, I think, more acceptable. Landing on roofs, we will see, of course, vertiports on roof at a certain point of time. why it shouldn't be possible. If you can land with a helicopter on a roof, why you shouldn't be able to land with a volocopter or another UAM in the future on the roof. But I think most of the routes that we're currently discussing, they are rather looking at first demonstrations. So it's from airport to downtown. In downtown, there are different options. And even in Paris, they're looking at options landing on a roof, but probably in a second step, not in a first step.
I was just wondering, because you did this in Rome, and that's where you plan, I think, to commercialize the first commercialization. Is it different? Is your experience so far that the reception is very different from city to city?
Every city is different. That's why we always partner up with local companies and authorities in order to develop that system. It has to be, you have to have the local knowledge, you have to have the understanding what is important in that area. So you always need a local network of partners.
And how does the approach in Europe, so we're talking about cities within the EU, within Europe, how does the approach in Europe compare with what is happening in other parts of the world to facilitate urban air mobility? Are we doing particularly well? Are we backward in terms of addressing these issues? Where does Europe sit in that ranking?
We can compare it with Singapore, for example, where we will start operating also end of 24, beginning 25, a touristic flight in the Marina Bay. 12 minutes round trip. There, the authorities have been really, really fast and forthcoming. We also got a land in order to build a voloport there. So we see that Singapore has always been a very innovative city and country. So we see a lot of support there. I think it's not always like that, but we see also in Asia, we see there's a high interest in UAM, and they really want to be at the forefront of that new modality. So we see that they're really eager to engage and to do a fast forward.
Because I just wanted to come back on this idea of, you said it's going to be step by step, and we had that very interesting comment from Marcel, which we built on and discussed later on about, we tend to say, okay, the sky full of these things, it's going to be, and we mentally approach it from, it's a problem, we're going to have to deal with it. And he was saying, no, we should encourage precisely what you're doing. You start bit by bit and so on. Do you think, is the mentality, is the attitude, so Europe perhaps Europe in other areas is criticised for always looking at the risks of innovation and not the opportunities. Is this the case on this, or do you think we're doing better in terms of embracing the innovation?
I think we're doing well. I think we are still, let's say, I looked at that topic 2015, 2016 when I started to work for Airbus. And I wouldn't have expected that we would go into a certified operation end of 24. I wouldn't have guessed that at that time. So I think we are complicated, we are slow, but we still make things happen. So I think we are still innovative. We're creating innovations everywhere. I think Europe has a strong culture of innovation, and I think our diversity is probably also at the root cause of it. Are we always more complicated? Yes, sometimes I think, but I wouldn't say we are worse than in other nations of the world.
So interesting, because Christine Berg, you might have heard her in the last session from the Commission saying we tend to focus on where we're not doing so well and where we're lagging behind, and actually we should shout a bit more about the things that we achieve. Coming back to Europe, coming back to the EU, in terms of SESAR, and you talked about why you joined, can you just tell me a little bit more in terms of how SESAR is really helping to progress on these issues that we're discussing, and what your expectations are now as we go into SESAR 3?
Yeah, if you look at the brochure that's laying out on the table, and I looked a bit at the flagship programs for the Digital Sky initiative, if we only do what is written there, this would be magic. I think if we can implement these projects, if we can accelerate these projects, I think my wish list is covered. So is it easy? No. I know that there are currently a lot of discussions with ATM happening on these topics, and progress is rather slow. But if we can execute the wish list along that brochure, I'm totally fine for the future, because this gives us time while we do the step-by-step approach in our, let's say, pilot cities, commercializing operation, still with a pilot, creating confidence that the public can accept this new modality. And then in preparing for the real business case, which is autonomous flying, and then hopefully we have the rules and the regulations set in close alignment with the next level of ATM in order to fly at a different level.
And a final question, because I've been asking all my panels and hot seat interviewees all day. For you, if you had to identify, let's put it this way, the key next step as we go away from this conference today to make sure that when the second SESAR 3JU conference happens, we can say, yes, we are on track, we have accelerated, we are moving absolutely, not just moving in the right direction, but fast enough. What is your priority?
Hopefully we see progress in the discussion on ATM level, that we're opening up, not only saying, yes, we are open, but nothing happens, but really tackling the topics according to the list, which is clear. I think everyone has the same list of topics that need to be done. So really making progress, evolving to the next level. This is not going to happen in 1 year, but we need to get started and we need to accelerate.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking Dirk very much indeed? Thank you so much.